Welcome back to This Leader, where we talk about the transformational, high-impact secrets and strategies that turn ordinary people into extraordinary leaders. I'm Claire Laughlin, and I'm so glad you're here. Okay, imagine this. You roll out a new system. It's better, it's faster, it's genuinely an amazing upgrade to your current system. There was, a solid, logical rollout plan. You built that, and I mean, you really thought of everything. But then, of course, one of your team members, or several, comes to the office frustrated and overwhelmed. This isn't going to work, they say. And your instinct is to review the plan again, to reassure them, to dazzle them with the compelling reasons behind the change and a lovely vision of the future. But the harder you push, the more it backfires. Because here's one thing I've come to believe. It is the leader's job to lead the way through change. But most of us are trying to lead change without really understanding where real change starts, which is in the brain. And when we don't get that, we end up sort of fire hosing people with reasons and plans, even when their capacity to process all that logic is gone. My guest today is going to help us look under the hood and understand what's going on in those very moments. Lisa Riegel is back, and if you caught our first conversation, remember she talked about Harold and Bob, the data manager and the security guard who are running the show in our unconscious brains. Lisa spent 2 decades as an educator, researcher, and author studying how the brain drives behavior and how systems shape whether people succeed. She holds a PhD in education policy and leadership from Ohio State. She's written 5 books, including her 2 latest, Aspirations to Operations and NeuroWell. And she is masterful at explaining how we can work with the brain instead of against it to become happier, healthier, and more successful. She has a gift for taking what's happening in our subconscious minds and making it so clear and so human that you suddenly understand yourself at a new level. In this conversation, Lisa and I get into why sticking with, just the facts is a myth, and why telling someone to calm down when they're, excited or angry is one of the worst things you can say, and what leaders can do to create the conditions for change to land with ease instead of resistance. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Lisa Riegel. Hi, Lisa. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So good to have you. Since our last conversation, I've just been itching to have you come back and share more. So many things you said in our last conversation just really struck me. Harold and Bob, that really stuck with me. Maybe we'll bring Harold and Bob back into our conversation today.
Yep.
But something we didn't have a lot of chance to talk about last time was the nature of change. And I would love to talk with you about change because I really kind of stand firmly on this belief that it is the leader's job to lead the way through change, but it's hard. And I think a lot of times we're not even really conscientious as leaders that change is happening for the people. Like, when do I jump in and really sort of be proactive about leading change or not? But I know you have a lot to share about the nature of change. So I'm going to stop talking and let you jump in. Tell us about what happens in the process of change.
Yeah, well, and it kind of goes back to Harold and Bob, right? Our brain is set up to know what's happening. Like when the unknown, you think anxiety is the product of not knowing. Our brain is comfortable with what it knows, even if what it knows leads us to the wrong place. And so that's where Harold and Bob come in, is that the brain is kind of like a giant organization. And so when you think of how we process our environment and how we construct our perceptions from reality, it's really grounded in the unconscious part of our brain. And 80% of our brain is unconscious. So there's a whole lot of thinking that's going on that we don't have access to. So we think we're in control, but we're really not in control a lot of times. So there's different departments that are responsible. The first department's kind of like your data management department, and that's Harold. And I named him because it makes it easier for me. Harold is my data manager. He's my thalamus. And his job is to look into the environment and say, okay, what's happening here? He brings in all the sensory information, and he immediately goes into our amygdala where we store sensory associations. And that whole limbic brain doesn't know time and can't tell a story. So he's going to pull associations. They could be associations from when you were 5 years old, or associations from right now, or associations from yesterday. So he goes in and pulls those associations and says, this experience is like that one. Because again, our brain is seeking stability. So he then writes up a report and sends it to Bob, who's our security manager. And Bob kind of says, okay, are we in danger or not? And then Bob's the one that decides how we physically respond to what's going on in our environment.
Okay.
And so it's important to understand that because Harold has certain belief systems within him. And again, this is all unconscious. You know, if I believe that people who wear glasses are scary and dangerous, then if he makes that association, when I see somebody with glasses, my body will dysregulate because it will feel fear, even though that doesn't make any sense at all. I always use the example of like when I was a little kid and my parents were divorced, my dad would pick me up and he was like always late. Sometimes he didn't come, sometimes he was late. He was a physician. Sometimes he would get stuck in surgery and couldn't call. And so I spent a lot of time sitting on the front porch waiting for my dad. So in my little brain, Harold, at 8 years old, assigned time and lateness to worth and love. That's a faulty association. But what happened then is, you know, it doesn't feel good when you feel like you've been left behind. So I would have negative body reactions, negative stress reactions. Flash forward, I'm 30 years old. My husband's late, and I'm so angry and anxious about it that I can't even enjoy. It takes time for me to calm my body down. Once I understood that, I was able to say to Harold, hey, this is not that. What's happening right now is not that. So you need to decouple that association. And so once we start to be more self-aware of how our brain actually constructs our reality, and then we start to have some self-control. So it starts with self-awareness of how this mechanism works and like, what are the fears? So we talk about triggers a lot, and then we focus on what triggered us. But that's not really what's important. It's why did that trigger us? There's an underlying fear. As much as people say, hey, the past is the past and I'm over it, from a brain, you're not. Your brain's not over it. It's stored all that in there and it becomes kind of a filter that Harold uses to construct the perception of reality. I always use the visual of like, imagine you have a banana and the banana is reality. And Harold has all these different filters, like almost like spaghetti strainers in your brain. And he goes in and pulls those up. So like for me, pulls up, he's late and pulls up these filters that have negative associations.
Right.
Jam the banana through those filters. At the other side, the banana is still a banana, but it doesn't look like the banana. And so our perception is never actually reality. Our perception is how Harold has made associations between the current reality and our entire life story. So change starts in the brain. And so as we think about changes or unknown things, understanding who your Harold is can be super helpful in helping you have more control about how you respond in a particular situation. And for leaders, understanding that we all have this. This isn't a kid thing. This is an everybody thing. So if we understand that the way that someone is reacting in a moment when I'm working with an employee, saying we're going to do something new and I'm getting some real negative vibes, it may have nothing to do with what's happening right now. So a good leader will stop and think for a minute, what's actually going on here? So like this morning, I was at a school and working with some teachers and working with their principal. And one of the teachers was really upset and stressed. And so she talked about what was going on. And when she left, I said to the principal, we're trying to solve what is happening in this moment. And I'm like, but that's not what we need to be solving. We need to be thinking about, so in this particular case, this teacher really has a strong sense of wanting to feel effective, wanting to feel knowledgeable and, productive and effective for the students. Well, this situation was making her feel ineffective. And so she was having an anger and stress and emotional response. So I'm like, we need to decouple this situation from her perception of herself as effective. So the way we talk about this situation, we need to be able to reinforce to her that the current situation they were dealing with isn't related to her ability to teach well or her ability to connect with kids or anything else. It actually had to do with a whole bunch of logistics issues. And so once we looked at the problem that way, we actually reframed some procedures that they use with students in the next year that will prevent this situation from arising again.
I love that. So one of the things that really struck me is this. You're talking about this teacher this morning, and she's having a reaction. because there's a Harold in her brain that's linking whatever the detail is with me and my ability to be competent and effective, right? And you told the story about you and sort of linking a few minutes late or whatever, lateness with am I loved? Am I worthy? Something like that. So, Lisa, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about a million ways I do that. And I'm thinking about other people I interact with. And I'm thinking, how do you encourage them to stop and decouple the emotional moment from the story? Because I feel like everybody is super convinced that it's like, no, it's not something from my past that's making me so angry that you're 10 minutes late. It's the fact that you're 10 minutes late, right? So, how do you get someone to even acknowledge that there's something in between?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I encourage is to stop and not say, what am I mad at? But ask yourself, why is this making me mad?
Yeah.
What is the emotion that's coming up in me that, like, and we kind of know how we feel. Like, you might be sitting there and you're getting angry and you're feeling like nobody's listening to you, or you feel like you're overwhelmed, you can't solve a problem, or things like that. But why is this creating that for me? And I think people don't oftentimes get beyond. So, like, I do a stress triggers activity with folks. And, it asks questions like, how do you feel when somebody gives you constructive feedback? Or if somebody's late? Or how do you feel in big, loud spaces? All kinds of sensory type questions. But then the question is, what is the underlying fear? Because our brain is completely wired to look for fear because it's there. That whole limbic system is to keep you alive. So you need to feel fear if there's an animal chasing you, right? So it's about fear is what all of that is about. So thinking, why is this upsetting me and what am I afraid of? Like, what is the fear that's coming out? And then you can start to look for patterns in your life that, like, okay, I feel this same way where I'm feeling challenged that I'm effective or whatever your trigger is. This is a history of examples. Our brain learns through repetition, experience, and emotion. So for me, like, if my dad had been late once, that association wouldn't stick, but it was a consistent thing. And then it was reinforced over the fact that I was not self-aware. So then if my husband's late or somebody else is late, it's another example that's fed into that sensory filter for Harold that makes the filter stronger and stronger. So you can almost think of it like, if you think of it as a strainer or spaghetti strainer, once it's established as a filter after some repetition, the holes are still pretty big. Information still flows through those holes pretty easily. But the more it happens in different contexts, the mesh gets tighter and tighter. And so that banana gets smashed up even more through that filter than through a filter that maybe is more loose.
I love that. And I'm assuming also that actually having some baseline knowledge of how these different parts of the brain work, like independent of you as a human being, right? These parts of the brain, you have this thalamus, that's the function that's going to happen and all that. Okay, so first and foremost, we've got to tease out the experience that we're having from something under the surface of, like, where did this come from, or what's the kind of storyline that goes along with this experience, so that we can start to understand, oh, okay, 5 minutes late is just 5 minutes late. It's just the baseline fact. That's all there is to it. Nothing to do with my worthiness, my lovability, nothing like that. Whatever's happening at the school, this logistics issue, actually has no reflection on me and my competence level. It's just what it is. So face value. It just is that. I work with people a lot to try to tease those things apart. Like, let's go down to what is observable. What would a surveillance camera capture? Let's say there was no emotion to it. Could you describe the scene almost through the lens of a surveillance camera that doesn't capture emotion? So now you have to say, I'm sitting on the curb in front of my house, and I'm sitting on the curb at 6 o'clock, and I'm sitting on the curb at 6:03, and I'm sitting on the curb at 6:20. And that's it. Those are the observable facts.
Yeah. And I love the surveillance camera thing. I actually was doing some life coaching with someone who was having marital issues. And I said, what I want you to do the next time it starts, the picking back and forth starts, is separate yourself and be a fly on the wall.
Right.
Watch the interaction and separate yourself emotionally from how you feel about it to what is actually happening. And then tell me how it's different. And he came back and he was like, it's like night and day how I'm responding. He's like, it was the best exercise I ever did was basically to create my own, surveillance camera or fly on the wall type thing, because he was able to look at the situation through his wife's eyes and how he was behaving. And like I said, be the narrator of the story. Like instead of being in the story, narrate it. And I said, then you're going to start to realize, because then you can pull out of that, like, this is about me and how I feel. And you just see two people who are picking at each other. And you can start to step in and say, that's not healthy. Like maybe I need to do something different.
Right. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of an exercise I used to do in my interpersonal communication classes where I would have people write like a screenplay of one of their. Now you have to get into all the roles and you have to think about what happened for that person and what happened for this person and what's a little bit of the backstory. And just to be able to separate oneself from the emotion of the moment. I still think that, I mean, yes, of course I do. This is still very difficult for many people. We get so entrenched in this idea that no, fundamentally, okay, whatever you just did absolutely 100% counts as disrespect, flat out. You know what I mean? Like it would count as disrespect for anyone. Anyone would interpret it that way, which of course is not true, but we get very convinced that our stories are ironclad, right?
Well, and that's where I think understanding just the basic functionality of the brain and this Harold and Bob thing, just understanding that that exists gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more self-aware, to be able to stop and be like, okay, this is my interpretation. And the person I'm talking to, they have their own Harold and Bob going on. And so when they say something to me, it's coming through back through the filter of their life. Now I can start to say, okay, did they really mean that? Like, I know that person, because then it becomes, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Like, even today, talking with the leader, I was like, when you start to talk to her, like there was a text message that was sent and it was interpreted. And I said, so, you look at what you intended in that text message, but if you had stopped to think about who this person is and what you know of them, right? You might have worded it different. So communication becomes super important because it's not what you say, but sometimes it's how you say it. And sometimes it's when you start to see things escalate, to stop and to just say, I can see that you're getting really upset and I do not intend to make you upset. So what is going on here? Because I am so sorry that whatever I said made you upset, because that was not my intention. So let's stop here and make sure that we understand our intentions. And that, I think people are uncomfortable doing that. So it's like people start to get snippy or they get angry or they shut down. And the other person either keeps talking because they try to justify themselves, but that person's not listening anymore. So just that basic understanding of the brain can make such a difference for leaders. And I had a writing teacher once in college that was fantastic. His name was Larry Starzik. And he said to me, when you are a good writer, you have like the good angel and the critic angel. And the good angel's your artist. It's your emotional, like, oh, this is lovely. I love everything I'm writing. And then you've got the critic on your shoulder that's going, that's terrible. Like, what are you talking about? Right. And it's the same kind of thing when you're in a situation where you've got like Harold and Bob on one shoulder and you have to put your thinking brain on the other shoulder to say, wait a minute, two things can be true at once, or maybe this isn't what it meant. So, slow your roll here, Harold and Bob. Let's analyze this for just a second. And it's a skill that takes some time and practice. But boy, I'll tell you, when you can do that, you can have self-regulation and then you have self-control. And then you have fewer times where you go home once you calm down and you're like, oh my gosh, I burnt bridges, or why did I say that? Or now I'm embarrassed because I made a fool out of myself. And so that self-awareness to me is the foundation for being happier, healthier, and more successful.
Absolutely. There is no substitute. So let's get back to the leader. Okay, we're going to assume that the leaders know a little bit about Harold and Bob. And if I'm a leader and I know a little bit about Harold and Bob, and I know that it's my job to lead my people through change, then when something comes about and it represents a potential threat for my team members. And it doesn't represent a potential threat for me. I mean, I'm fine with it, but something's happening for them. And I'm not sure what it is. A lot of times I think a leader will say, that doesn't feel relevant, stay with the facts type thing, like nothing is happening yet, or don't worry. Don't worry about what might come next or whatever. Like we give pep talks, we try to allay fears, we do all those things in words. What would you say is maybe a better path forward for a leader?
Well, I think leaders need to recognize there is no such thing as just facts. We don't think in facts. All facts are tied to emotion. All facts. They go through the filter. And like, what's the worst thing you can say to somebody who's angry is calm down, or it's not that bad. Well, it is that bad for them in that moment. Their brain has decided it's that bad. So when we start to think about de-escalating a person, sometimes it's a matter of like, okay, I can see that whatever I just said really upset you. Like, let's just take a minute and let's get a cup of coffee and we're going to come back in a couple minutes and talk about it, right? So giving that person time to escape, to calm that body down, to regulate, because I think a lot of times we see people escalate and we try to fix it in the moment. You can't. Because what happens, and they call it, like when you're teaching about the brain, they call it popping the top, right? So when that happens, the thinking part of your brain and the part where your morals and logic and all of that live is not online, because if Bob hits the panic button, he basically sends a message directly to the CEO's office that says, we are in danger. We have fear. You need to go down the street, get a cup of coffee, get out of the office. Building's in danger, right? We'll call you when it's fine. So you're no longer running the organization. And so we have to get back to a calmer state physically, and then your CEO comes back in the office. So I think sometimes I would say to a leader, just take a pause, like stop and pause and give that person a minute just to breathe, right? And then come back and say, okay, let's talk about why that upset you. And again, I think saying out loud, that was not my intention, because, people will be like, he made me mad. Well, he didn't make you mad. Harold made you mad. And then if his intention was to make you mad, then okay, sometimes it is, right? But if you state as a leader, my intention was not to upset you, or my intention was not to add more stress to you. So let's take a beat, get a glass of water or coffee, whatever, come back, and then let's talk about why this is so stressful for you so that I can support you in this change. Rather than I'm going to fire hose you with all the justifications for why this change is happening, that's just going to ramp you up.
Right. Let me dazzle you with this beautiful vision of the future that I can see.
You may not have any idea why this vision is useful, right? And I think sometimes we don't think about anytime we change, we have to say goodbye to things that we know. And so there's a mourning period, like you look at like right now in the workforce with all AI going on and the changes in just how people do their jobs, there is some very like scary stuff. Like I maybe was like the expert in a certain function within the company, and you're asking me to change, and I may completely see the logic of it. Like I see that this is a better process, but from an identity perspective, you're taking away something that I was an expert at. And now I feel like that expertise is gone, and that sort of sense of who I am in the organization and how I fit in the team starts to feel uncomfortable and can lead to a lot of stress. And so I think a lot of times we focus on why we're making the change and the logic behind the change. But what we don't focus on is the fact that change is not logic. Change is emotional, no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. So how does this fit into your 7 steps?
Okay. So there's 7 different conditions that need to happen in order for change to occur. The first one is we have to know where to go instead. So let's say you and I decide we're going to eat healthier. We eat terrible. We want to lose some weight. We want to get fit. So I might say to you, okay, Claire, instead of going to the Mexican restaurant tonight for happy hour, let's go to the Golden Corral. The first thing is we have to know where to go instead. And a lot of times we don't know where to go. And that's where clarity in leadership is so important, because if I can't see the desired state or the end goal, then I end up at Golden Corral and now I'm just spinning my wheels, right? So that's the first thing that's really important, is knowing where to go. The second is having that self-awareness to drive past the comfortable exit to the new exit. Like if you and I decide we're going to go to a vegetable restaurant instead, I have to have the wherewithal that when my car is in autopilot and I'm headed to the Mexican place, that I stop and say, no, I have goals. I was going to meet this. I'm going to stick to my goal. I'm going to go to that other restaurant. And that's where that self-awareness comes to be really important, because when we lose self-awareness, a lot of times is when we're stressed. So keeping ourselves calm so that this part of our brain that says, I'm going to make this change is still there, as opposed to, we've all done it before, like, you're trying to lose weight or whatever, and you're like, but I had a rough day. And so I deserve this or I that or that. That's Harold and Bob talking. That's like, comfort me, right? Make my brain comfortable. So we want to keep the CEO in charge. So that's the second one. The third one is we have to have the will to be uncomfortable. You and I are going to go to this restaurant and be like, what is this? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to eat that. We have to be comfortable with the change. And sometimes as we go through things, people like have to try a new process or do a new software or whatever it is. And when we're not comfortable or willing to be uncomfortable, then what happens is Harold and Bob get insanely angry the first time you try something and it doesn't work, and you explode and you have big emotions and you shut down. That's the third thing. The fourth is we have to maintain energy, because it takes a lot of energy. So from a brain science perspective, when you're building automatic connections in your brain, it's like you think of your brain like a highway, and it's like it starts out like a big grassy field. And if you think about, like, if you've ever been on a college campus and you see like a dirt track, you're like,
Yeah,
man,
dirt track across the big grassy field, right?
it's kind of like that in our brain. We have to lay down the road, and it's through that repetition that we pave the road. Well, just like paving a road takes a lot of energy, so does building a connection in your brain. And so how do we get energy? Well, we get energy through dopamine. And so how do we get dopamine?
Like through small wins, right?
And through recognition and through celebration. And it's interesting, when I did my doctoral work, I did a leadership factor, and it talked about high expectations as one of the factors. When I looked at that with leaders, it divided into two. Some leaders had high expectations and no celebrations. Other leaders were celebrating like crazy, but not having high expectations. You've got to have both, right? And then the other thing is you need to have the persistence to stick to it. So sometimes having like extrinsic contests, rewards, that's why like sometimes in companies, if they're trying to get healthy, like walking clubs or doing it with a friend, having that kind of persistence can be helpful. And then the big one is you have to have the tenacity to forgive yourself, because your brain likes habits. It likes what it knows. And so even if it knows it's taking you to the wrong place, it likes it. It's why you see people who get in destructive relationships and then they get out of it and they enter right back into another one, because even though they know it's bad, at least they know what will happen. And the unknown is no good for the brain. So we have to forgive ourselves. So you and I are going to end at the Mexican restaurant at some point. And what we have to do at that point is make a big decision to say either, well, that was fun, even though I don't feel good because I've been eating healthier, right? Tomorrow we're going to go back to the vegetable restaurant, right? Or we say, which is what a lot of people say, is we were never meant to be healthy. So the key of building a new habit is you've got to go over and over until that exit ramp in your brain is paved. And you have to do it so frequently that the one that you used to use starts to get weeds and makes more friction to use that one. And then you need the support. And the support is like, we'll do it together, or sometimes like extrinsic rewards. The guy who won the Nobel Peace Prize for this studied extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. And what he found was that when we are trying something new, extrinsic rewards are really powerful. So if I said, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, and if I do, I'm going to get myself a pair of tennis shoes or gym clothes or whatever, that then on a Thursday night when I'm like, ugh, I don't want to go in the morning, that might be enough for me to go, yeah, but if I go tomorrow, I can go buy shoes this weekend. That might be enough. But the key is once the habit starts to form and you're getting that road is starting to get paved, then those actually can serve to disincentivize the behavior. So if I say I've started working out and now it's like a Thursday night and I'm tired and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to go. And you know what? I don't need more shoes anyways.
Right, right. Yes. I love that you said that, because I feel like I've seen this happen several times where we over index on the external rewards. And it's like, you don't need to throw a party every time this happens. You don't need to give away gift cards. Like, that is not the right path over time.
Well, the other problem you run into is that some people on your team, we do programs for like everybody, right? So everybody will get a gift card if they do it. Well, some people were already doing it. So now you're extrinsically rewarding a behavior and then it becomes transactional. Well, I'm not doing it until I get the gift card, even though you used to do it because it was just the right thing to do. So one of the things I talk with leaders about is individualizing the extrinsic rewards program. So like we have this change we're going to put in place. And it's going to require you to learn a new system. It's going to require you to follow this process. It's going to require you to interface with another department, whatever it is. So, what's the one challenge for you in this change? Like some people might not have any problem with the software or any problem with the process. Maybe they don't like collaborating. So, look at all the behaviors that you need to have happen of the people on your team and then ask them to select which one they want to work on so that you have a targeted goal. And then you extrinsically reward that.
Let me feed that back to you because I think that's really important. So I might look at my team and say, we're going to adopt this new software. It's going to require that we learn the new software. We revise some of our processes along the way. We write new SOPs, for example. We then become experts and then we go teach others. Okay. So let's say that those are the steps of the change that we're requesting. So now I've got somebody on my team that says, I'm not a computer person. I've never been good at this. I learned when I was a kid that it's embarrassing when you don't know these things. So I don't even want to try, something like that. My Herald is telling me that that's a dangerous activity. So you engage in the conversations and you find out that for one person, really learning the software is going to be a problem. For somebody else, they don't have any problem with any step of the process itself, but they have a time management issue and they've got a lot of other pressing priorities and they don't know how to get this into the queue in a sense. So you would have conversations with each of those people. You would try to identify the unique barriers that each of those folks might face. And you might set up some kind of reward or praise or feedback system, I guess I'll just call it that, to help the person have positive associations with the small behaviors that they are doing to help them down that road.
Yep. And I'll give you an example that I talk about in my book because there's 7 conditions that you need to have in place to change. And I created an 8C commitment framework that addresses those 7 Cs. It's 7 conditions, but it's this 8C framework. And so the first part of the framework is clarity, cadence, and coherence. And so what I see leaders oftentimes do is provide a really fuzzy picture of where the desired state is. They don't move from the 10,000 foot level down to the 10-foot level to truly understand what are the actions and behavior changes that need to happen on the staff. So like I've worked with teams that are like, we need to strengthen our teams. We need our teams to be more autonomous. We need them engaged and doing what they're doing. So we start with that. Let's actually operationalize. What do you want? Does that mean I meet twice a week? Does that mean I do a report? Like what is the concrete? What do I see? What do I hear when I'm a strong team? Then you say coherence. So what are the other things that we have in place that we already do that are part of this so that it doesn't become so many changes are presented as the new thing and it's separate from all the other things we do? How do we wedge that into what we already do? And sometimes it means revising other things we do. Sometimes it means getting rid of them, but finding that coherence. And then the cadence piece is where some of this comes in is, okay, let's say I want my teams to be stronger and I want them to be analyzing data and coming to me with solutions. I'm tired of them just telling me the problems, right? Well, let's stair step this out. So at phase 1, I have to understand how to use the system to pull the data, right? Then I have to understand how to analyze data. Then I have to understand how to align a solution and go through kind of what are the intended, unintended consequences. So if you're asking me to get to a point where I'm presenting solutions, but I don't know how to do this, it's too far. The zone of proximal development is too far. I work with leaders to let's create a level 1, a level 2, a level 3. So if you imagine it like the leader, like there's a big, scary, rapid-filled river in front of us. And we're living in this side of the river and now we're running out of resources. So the leader says, okay, we're finding this great spot of land where we're going to build our new town. It's perfect. It's wonderful. It's going to have everything we need. All we need to do is go across this river. Well, some people can't swim. So You need to put stepping stones across the river as opposed to saying, that's where we're going. Here's a pole vault. Good luck.
Jump in, jump across. Yes.
Yeah. So I work with them to break down the process of change into concrete steps. And then you have people. So then I might come to you and say, okay, Claire, here's where we're headed. Here's the steps we need to get there. Where are you right now? And how can I support you? So, okay, you're struggling with understanding you can get into the data, but you don't really know what to do with it. Okay, let me give you some support on that versus how do you write a report up, right? You can't even write a report. You haven't done the data. So it's putting those stepping stones in place and then setting some thresholds for the cadence. Okay, our whole team is going to be at a level 2 by the end of Q3, right? And then I'm going to expect that, maybe 30% of our team's already going to be on a level 4 or a level 5 or however many you've broken it down to. So you're giving people permission to iterate change instead of just today we do it this way, tomorrow we're doing it that way. It's good for all of us. Have at it.
Right. Like flip the switch.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to practice. We have to take it one step at a time, essentially.
Yep. Every step you have to celebrate. And because that's that 7 conditions. You need the dopamine, you need the reinforcement, you need the support, you need to go know where you're going, right? And so if you think of each of the steps and then you say, okay, now I'm going to set up the conditions to support people as they work through these steps and struggle through some different things.
Right. That's so good. So mostly it feels to me a little bit like what we're talking about here is organizational level changes that have some mapping at the organizational level, like phases, for example, and the things that we need to know organizationally. We need to have this new software in place and everyone trained by such and such a date. So let's back up from that and look organizationally at what that means, department by department, division by division, whatever that is, over a period of time, et cetera. So we need to do that at the organizational level. And then we need to go in to a smaller group or, a team level or whatever, a department, a division level, et cetera. And we need to think through the barriers and what's going to support the change and what might hinder the change adoption, right? At that level. And then you're even saying beyond that, we may go to the very individual level and look at what's going to help you personally, Lisa. What's going to help you? Where's your specific barrier and how can I help support you as you're creating a new habit to get through this particular barrier?
Yeah. And, just like if we wanted to eat healthier, it's easier when you're doing it with a friend. Like if you set up these stepping stones in clear language and it's non-threatening, it's, hey, this is a change. There's a lot of things that are going to be different. So like, here's how I'm envisioning sort of the skill ladder that we need to do. So where are you now? So maybe you and I both are at a level 2. Okay, you and Claire, you guys are going to work together and you're going to work together on this. That's your goal. And, Joey, who's already a level 4, is going to mentor you and help you get to a level 4. So what I see in companies a lot, and really all organizations, is we spend time saying this is the change we want, but then we forget to engage the human system.
Yes.
There's a human system that has to make that change happen. And so once you get through those planning C's of like clarity, cadence, and coherence, then you move into engagement C's of like collaboration and coaching. And I talk about organizations, like if you think of your organization as a boat with 10 people on it, and your clarity and your coherence and your cadence, that's setting the coordinates for where you're going, right? And so you get to do that. You're the leader. It's not groupthink. Like everybody doesn't get a vote on where we're going. But now you got these people in a boat. So you're going to have, and organizational studies have shown about 2 to 3 people are going to row like crazy in the right direction. You're going to have about 5 people that stare at the scenery, periodically dip the oar in the water, and sometimes pull up, and sometimes they cause friction that slows the boat down, right? And 2 to 3 people, depending on your culture, that are going to actively try to sink your boat. They're going to be down drilling holes in the floor, right? So I do a thing with them that's an aptitude attitude matrix where they look at like, okay, now I know what the steps are to get us to our desired state. Who already has the skill and who is willing? Those are your rowers, right? Then you have people who are willing but not able. They don't have the skills. They're easy. You train them, you support them, you give them positive feedback. They will be rowing in the right direction in no time. Then you have people who are able but not willing. And that's when you start to say, okay, how is their perception being threatened? What's the emotional impact of this change? What is happening that's making them unwilling to make that change? Sometimes what I find a lot of times is it's a fear of not being the local expert anymore. These are people who've been in your company for a long time, that know their jobs, that are informal leaders and experts that people come to, and you just pulled the rug out from them. So they are going to say this change is dumb, it doesn't work, I don't know why we're doing it, we've done this before. They're going to say all those things, right? And then you have some people who are unwilling and unable, and those people need to be counseled to a different position or a different company to say, we're moving in this direction. You don't get to choose, but I'm going to be here to help you make sure that you have everything you need to get there. And the ultimate goal, there's a really great book. It's called The Boys on the Boat.
Yeah, I love that book. Yeah.
I drive a lot, so I had it as a book on tape, and I'm like, why do I want to listen about a crew team, right? I started listening to it. I was like, this is an amazing leadership book. And it talks about the goal of the boat is to not catch a craw, which puts friction in. And so the Olympic team back in the 40s, they actually won the Olympics. They won the gold medal. They rowed slower and the boat went faster because they were in such sync that the boat itself became like one organism versus 10 different people in the boat. And that's what you want. And the only way you can get there is by addressing these different issues, because otherwise you have people paddling all over the place. It's expensive for the company and it's ineffective, and it costs morale and opportunity costs and culture costs. So it really is very expensive not to think about how do I engage the human system.
Right. Boy, unnecessary friction. Boy, oh boy, is that the truth. Okay, so we've got 5 of your C's. What are the last 3?
So the last 3 are the sustainability C's. So you've got the boat moving, you've got the people engaged. So now it's communication and celebration. How many times in a company do you go get training and nobody ever talks about it again? Sustaining change means ongoing communication. It's that feedback loop where whether it's the leadership monitoring, whether it's how you set up your agendas so that it's constantly back in front of people. And then the second C, celebration piece. And that celebration is one of the things that I see done so poorly. I mean, companies spend a fortune on, sweatshirts or the team lunch. And those are nice. I mean, it's nice, but they're not going to move your people to engage in an initiative. They're going to say, we had a great lunch. My boss is great, but it's not going to change effectiveness and efficiency. What you want to think about is authentic celebration. So one thing that I've done with leaders is called 100 ways in 100 days. And so you pick what you want to see change. You use your stepping stones and you say, okay, I want every team member to challenge themselves to move from whatever level you're on to one level up in the next 100 days or whatever you want. Then at every team meeting, you give a postcard to the person. And so if you're a virtual team, you might have it on a Flipboard or something, but have something visual. This builds collective efficacy. There's 4 ways you do it. The first is master experience. Just do it. The second is look at other people do it, vicarious experience. The third is emotional arousal, meaning that dopamine hit, right? The fourth is peer persuasion, which is kind of like, this is how we do things here. So it becomes kind of a cultural piece. So the 100 ways in 100 days, I might say, okay, Claire, at the next meeting, you're presenting. So you would have an index card and you would write down, here's what I did and, in regard to my change, and here's how I'm going to do it different next time or continue to improve it, or here's what I learned. So you give them permission not to be perfect. So first of all, you're forcing them to do something because they have to. Second of all, they're sharing with the team and the team is hearing it. And it's like, oh, well, if she did that, I could do that, right? So it serves to further clarify what the change looks like. Then you take those index cards, and if you're in a brick and mortar office, put them in the copy room. Now I'm in the copy room or the mail room or wherever, lunchroom, and I walk in and I see all of my colleagues are making these changes. And so that peer persuasion is there. And it also for me to look and say, oh, they're working on what I'm going to go ask her because she talked about that, right? So it promotes that collaboration. And it also gives that emotional arousal of way to go. So you get props that you are being recognized for your efforts. we're oftentimes not recognized for our efforts. We're recognized for the outcomes. I talk about outputs versus outcomes. Outputs are what we do or what we create as part of a change. Outcomes happened because we did it. As a leader, this 100 Ways in 100 Days focuses on an output. Like, look at what you did. We're so excited. And it also continues to enhance the whole team's understanding, and it can help promote, oh, well, this has emerged as the most efficient path for us. So let's all try that.
Right. Oh my God, you are a wealth of knowledge.
I didn't mention the last C. The last C is culture. It all starts with culture, because if a person walks into an organization and doesn't feel a sense of belonging or is in a toxic culture or then Harold is screaming at Bob all the time, this is shut down, and none of those other C's is going to matter.
Right. So you have to create a calm, engaging environment. I always say you have to care about your people. You have to care. There's no substitute for caring and wanting to create a positive experience of work.
And that's the other area. The celebration piece I see done really poorly, and the culture piece I see done really poorly. Like, environmental branding of your values and your culture is fine, but that doesn't make your culture. That just defines the desired state, right? So in the same way, when you're trying to get people to use a new software program or for your teams to be more effective, when you want to create a culture that is the lived culture of that organization, you have to say, okay, here are the values that we have. Here's the culture we want. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What's step one? What's step two? How do we start to build this culture? Because culture is not words, it's actions. It's what we do, not what we say. And I see companies that spend a tremendous amount of money on doing value statements or doing those kinds of mission and vision type work. And it's valuable work, except it just stays at the word level.
Yeah. It's not impacting the texture of the workday. It's not impacting how you feel when you get there in the morning and how you feel when you go home in the evening.
Right. And the 8C processes that we're talking about how you collaborate, how you celebrate, how you coach, all of those pieces create the culture. And a lot of organizations, when I go in and interview people, they talk about, yeah, the organization says they value this, but look what they're doing to us. Or look how there's a disconnect between the words and the actions. And that point, it's worse that you ever made the words, because now you've promised something and you've shown you're not reliable. And so I think having leaders thinking about culture is not a separate initiative. It's not like you have a different leader that focuses on culture. It's part of everything you do all day long. And you audit your practices based on those values. And if you're a leader and you're like, okay, we're going to put this in, does this fit into our core mission and values? And if it doesn't, why not?
Oh my gosh, so important. It absolutely should, right? Because we want to reduce all the friction and we want to help people get more of the good stuff done without the unnecessary friction. Lisa, thank you. This is so illuminating. I really appreciate it. I want you to tell my listeners a little bit about your upcoming summit.
Yes, it's called Women Who Rise Summit. It's in Asheville, North Carolina in August 21st. And it's a day to reinvent, to renew, and it's for women. There's 4 women who will be speaking that are authors, speakers, podcasters, and we will be sharing our stories. The program's kind of built like it starts with that platform of brain science and self-awareness. Another speaker is going to talk about the context and different factors in context that are linked to happiness and success. Then there's a speaker who's going to talk about why not me. I think sometimes we think, well, why me? But like, why not me? Why are we not expecting good things for ourselves? And then the 4th speaker has kind of a just say yes type of promotion. And so she talks about how do you get yourself out there and just say yes, like to start really acting on the goals that you set. So it's going to be a day that's going to be full of learning and laughing and networking with other women. And people will walk away, I hope, feeling very rejuvenated and renewed and ready to tackle the things that are keeping them stuck.
Sounds like that would be really good for any women who are thinking about what's coming next or how to really lean into the next level of their development or their growth. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. It's kind of like, okay, you're here, but where do you want to be? And why aren't you there? Like, how can you make those changes? What's getting you stuck? Is it Harold and Bob? Is it your context? Is it your lack of feeling like, why not me? Like, I deserve this. It's even good. We're hosting it August 21st. And it's like kids are back in school. And, if you're a parent and working, it's like you spend the whole summer waiting on everybody else. And so it's like now it's fall. It's time to think about yourself again.
Good. I like it. Thank you for that. I will post the link to that event and your book, Aspirations to Operations. You've also got another book, NeuroWell. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. Do you want to say something about that one?
That one is brain science based, but it's more for educators. So if you're a parent or if you're in the education system in any way, that book would be really valuable for you. If you're in a different industry, maybe not looking through the lens of a parent, but really want to focus on your leadership, that Aspirations to Operations is good for leaders in education across, any industry.
Anyone who's trying to initiate and help change move forward with more ease and coherence. Awesome.
And just to be more self-aware as a leader. I'm available and I do keynotes, I do workshops. I had a podcast I was on and a lady emailed me and said, I just really wanted to talk to you more. Don't be a stranger. If this stuff's interesting, link with me on LinkedIn and, follow the stuff that I do there and set up a time to talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure that your social links and stuff are in the show notes as well. Thank you for coming. Can't wait to have you back again. Well, what a great conversation. I love talking with Lisa because she makes things so easy to understand. So here's a couple of my takeaways as a change leader. Change is emotional, right? Every time. So if you're leading the way and you're sharing all your facts and all your logic and a perfect plan, remember, there's no such thing as just the facts because every fact runs through Harold's filters and colors our experience moment to moment. It's fascinating to think about the ways I think our past is influencing our current reality and how we react to every change. Second, I said this earlier, but calm down or it's not that bad are pretty much meaningless when someone is really upset. In that moment, it is that bad for that person, and we've got to lead with empathy. And finally, every change asks people to say goodbye to something. Maybe it's an identity or an expertise that they were proud of. And there's a time for mourning, right? And good leaders make time for that. I'm so grateful to Dr. Lisa Riegel for coming back and going deeper with me on this. And if you want more of her thinking, her book, Aspirations to Operations, it's fantastic. And it's built for leaders leading change. She's also hosting the Women Who Rise Summit in Asheville this August. So check that out at womenwhorisesummit.com. I'll put the links to all of it, plus how you can connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. All that'll go in the show notes. And if this conversation sparks something for you, share it. Share it with another leader. I'm sure they'll thank you for it. And of course, let me ask, if you're getting value from the show, make sure you're subscribed. And please, please, please go leave me a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It makes a world of difference. Until next time, my friend, go lead the way.